Welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill with our guest, Trisha McManus. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully you tuned into the first episode where Trisha shared her absolutely amazing conversion story. And it was really quite an amazing story, being converted while working on a cruise ship. Definitely one of the more unique stories I've ever heard, but just really sharing from her own heart the restlessness in her own heart that led her to
Yes.
Christ. And what a beautiful testimony. And with that conversion to Christ, you've used it very well in the psychological realm. So you are a family and marriage therapist?
Yes, a marriage and family therapist. And that was very much part of the conversion, right? Like I think I mentioned to you, Father, of like when I had my conversion, that's when I had direction. That's where it's like, okay, Lord, you have plans. What is it that you want of me?
Mm.
And I had mentioned in the other episode that I feel very split between two passions. Obviously the passion for my faith, but also the passion for entertainment and broadcast, and the other one being in marriage and family therapy. And when that was made clear to me, because I had always wanted to be a therapist when I was a little girl. My
Really?
parents, again, kind of joking about my Filipino heritage. Often when you're growing up as a Filipina, it's like, so when are you going to be a nurse? Because I was like, so when are you going to go to nursing school?
There
It's
is
like,
an outsized number of Filipino nurses in the world.
yes,
Yes,
and
that's true.
God bless my brothers and sisters who are nurses.
Oh, do you have
I-
some siblings?
well,
that
I
are-
mean, like brothers and
oh,
sisters
it's
that
spiritual
are
brothers,
spiritual
sisters, not
brothers
your
and sisters.
biological ones. But
Exactly. Like my sister is not. She's a pastor's wife.
oh, okay.
A nurse in her own right by being a mom. But I had always said, no, I feel called to be a counselor. Like I just really want to be a healer. And I had always been afraid of it. So I did my undergrad in human services so that I could be a therapist. I'd hoped to be a therapist in the US, in Alaska. And
Mm.
as life continued, and I love this right now, there's all this talk of healing. I think sister, I forgot her name. She's one of the hosts for Abiding Together. She had mentioned that Father Schmidt had talked about how healing is continual. Or no, not Father Schmidt. It was Dr. Bob Schutz.
Oh,
He
yeah,
had talked
Bob
about
Schutz,
healing
wonderful,
and
great author on healing, inner
yeah,
healing.
exactly. So beautiful. And that was totally when I heard that, I'm like, that's totally it. That's totally it. Healing is a continual pursuit, and not just like a fix. I had a client really recently said, like, when I realized healing wasn't just a fix, I was deflated. And I
Mm.
said, oh, okay, tell me more. And it
Right,
was like
it's a continuum, not an
continual.
on and off switch.
Exactly. And a journey in your relationship with Christ. It's this like becoming more and more whole
I think that's a great
in
insight
Him,
and an important insight
right?
for people to hear because I think with physical health, it's a little bit clearer, right? When you're
Yes.
healed,
Yeah.
is that
My
okay?
bone is,
My wound is healed.
yeah,
It doesn't
exactly.
hurt anymore. Okay.
Hmm.
And you do see that kind of the black and white dichotomy. I'm healed. I'm injured. I'm
Yes.
healed. I'm sick. But
Hmm.
that's not the case. You're saying
Yeah.
psychologically that it's,
Psychologically, emotional healing, even just understanding, like having deeper insights as to what our emotions are for. Like what do we
mm,
do with them? That we have a relationship to our own emotions even, and that
yeah.
reaction to our emotions pose another sort of relationship with other people. Like if I'm masking my sadness and I don't want to share anything with you, well, then I'm holding something back from you that could actually bring us closer
Yeah.
in friendship and understanding and growth together.
So I've read Bob Schutz's book.
Hmm.
I think it's called Be Healed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful book. Really, I do recommend it. But it left me probably with more questions than answers. And I think one of the biggest
Okay.
questions it left me is just the idea of what psychological healing from psychological wounds looks like. Because,
Mm,
you know, certainly all of us in life have gone through wounds. I don't think any human being can get through this broken world without them.
mm,
But when I think about it, I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm healed because I still have the memories.
mm,
Maybe they still cause me a certain amount of pain.
mhm.
Maybe they influence my behavior in certain ways. And, so what does healing look like?
Mhm.
Because I mean, you certainly can't take away the memories and it has certainly shaped who you are.
Right. Well, again, I look at that. What is my relationship now to those memories? Do those memories leave me completely incapacitated and unable to function, or do I have a different? Do I have like maybe a step back from them,
Mm,
and I can look at those memories and go, man, what a time. And in a way, maybe even this is maybe pushing it, but like I grew from that.
Like
You
almost
know,
rejoiced,
I'm
right,
like,
in what's happened to you.
yeah, and then like I'm a better person for it, or that's kind of further along. But
Well, that's kind of what
but
I was concluding that, but Bob Schutz didn't, I think, really explain well was
mm,
when you can think about your memories, perhaps even hopefully in gratitude,
right.
but at least in peace,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not
Yes.
all of a sudden experiencing a lot of negative emotions
Yeah.
when you think of those
Anxiety
memories or
or yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
hurt, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be a goal. That would be like a hope for the healing. To definitely have a right relationship with the things that happened in the past and to not be slave to them, because then it's kind of like I'm being slave to, maybe it's a victimization. Maybe I'm being a slave to that idea of woe is me, or
Right. And it's almost as if, some people will experience a wound and then re-experience it,
yeah.
even as Christ wants us to, experience it, forgive, move on,
Mm-hmm.
and allow it to shape us in a good way. But
Yeah.
versus anytime it comes back, you're going back into that painful place of, it's almost as if you are re-victimized.
Right. Which is a very real thing. And so maybe perhaps there's more healing to be done there, or maybe it's kind of needing to look for and explore growing another part of us. Like in IFS, we talk about having different
What
parts.
is IFS?
Internal family systems. I would say that's probably one of the most, in the counseling world, there's a lot of different interventions or theories. There's internal family systems. There's Satir systemic. Satir is Virginia Satir was the founder of like systemic theory of family therapy. You have Sue Johnson. She recently died. She's the co-founder of emotion focused therapy.
Mm.
There's a lot. There's a lot of different schools of thought and schools of methodology, and internal family systems is so beautiful. I would say it's the one that aligns most with Catholicism, and it plays into all of these different methodologies. Kind of are doing the same thing in terms of helping us understand who we are and what parts there are that are playing out, and how does that impact our relationships with ourselves and with each other. So I lean towards, because I know it better than IFS at this moment, is emotion focused therapy, which is based and rooted in attachment theory. And attachment theory is basically the thought that we are, the concept that we are in our earliest attachments with our parents or caregivers, whoever was around, that we form our attachment styles at that time. And then those attachments then impact our adult relationship. So let's say I had a mom who was kind of neglectful. This isn't true, Mom. You weren't neglectful. But if she was neglectful,
Right.
I probably would be more of an anxious, attached person, because I'm like, oh, are you leaving now? Where are you going? Can I come with you? So there would be a lot more like anxiety about being left behind. If I had a parent who was very on top of me all the time, I might be like avoidant, want to be like, get away, it's too close, or abusive. That might lead to an avoidant attachment. So it's like, I don't want anything to do with you. You hurt me, you're painful. What we want for our kids is to be a safe haven where they can feel free to come and go. They can trust that we will be there if they need us, and that we can also, that they feel free to learn to become independent. So that would be a securely attached person. There's all different kinds: secure, avoidant attached, anxious attached. So there's lots of different.
But I think, like in most things, St. Thomas Aquinas talks about how virtue is the mean between two extremes, and probably that's very true in psychological and in relational as well. Right?
There's the intersect.
We want to find that happy medium between being super controlling and super neglectful. Right.
Yes.
So all virtue really is in the midpoint.
Perfect. Yeah, which is actually the beautiful thing about why. So I was so afraid to be a counselor, because I'm like, how could I ever be helpful to somebody? Like I'm so young, for one thing, and two, it's just like it's too overwhelming. But then eventually, when I had my conversion, it was like, no, Jesus is the real healer. And it's not just this like cheesy saying. It's not just oh, Jesus will be the counselor, and no, it's literally like he encompassed all of that, and he's left us with so much
Well, that brings up an awesome point that I don't know if you've ever read John Eldredge. He's a counselor, but also a great writer and author, particularly of a very famous book called Wild at Heart, which we actually did
I
an
know that
episode
name.
on.
Yes.
It's just about masculinity, and he wrote another one about femininity called Captivating. But he says something very interesting in there that I've thought really resonated in my own heart. So, like most people, I've been to therapy before, and I found it utterly unhelpful. And here's
Uh-huh.
why. Here's why. Because as he points out, he says understanding is not the same thing as healing.
Mm-hmm.
Because counseling gave me some great insights into myself, into my past, and that was very helpful. But I was like, well, but I'm still got the wounds,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So how does healing occur? And you mentioned like Jesus is the real healer. And
Yes.
I think God can directly heal our
Mm-hmm.
hearts.
Mm-hmm.
What's your insight? Then I'll share another insight I think about
Oh man,
healing.
there's so
But
many
what is
different ways in
yeah, how
which
does healing
Jesus is the
occur?
healer. So, okay. Well, it is that first recognizing that he has been through everything before. He knows what you're going through in a way that one of the biggest struggles is people go, well, how could you help me when you don't understand? You could never really know what I've gone through. I
Hmm.
had a client recently say, you look so unmoved. And I'm like, oh, wow, it's true because I haven't lived. I don't, you're
Do you want
telling
me to
me these
cry?
things. Yeah, you want me to cry? I'll cry with you. Nah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, it made sense. Like she wants someone to feel what she's felt.
Mm.
And it's
Hmm.
that as God, he knows what I'm going through. I would even dare say better than I know what I'm going through,
Agreed. Yeah,
right? And
definitely.
there's something um, so healing even just in that because it's like I'm not alone. Suddenly I'm not alone.
Mm.
That's one thing. And the other is that he's left us with so many beautiful I think of Our Lady and like, okay, women who were infertile. They've got Saint Elizabeth. Our Lady lost Jesus. He died before she did. Those
Sure.
so different stories like that are very helpful
Oh, absolutely.
and
Many of the saints experienced family turmoil.
exactly.
I think of
Mm-hmm.
Saint Rita of Cascia, whose husband
Yes.
was abusive and a member of the mafia, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's so many of
Husbands and
parents or who know. I
yeah,
mean,
infidelity and it goes
lives
on
of the
and
saints.
on.
No
Yeah.
saint came from a perfect family except for Jesus.
Exactly. Well, that's led
you
to
know.
their sainthood, right? And I think it's that. I think you mentioned gratitude as one piece, reconciling, and also kind of looking at what am I to do with this? You allowed this to happen to me,
Mm.
so that's another piece of like, wow, okay, he allowed this to happen. So what am I to do with this? Not why,
So seeing it in the light
but
of God's
in
providence,
God's
like
providence,
this is
and
for my sanctification, for my
yeah.
development. So what's
Mm-hmm.
the lesson? What's the takeaway?
Mm-hmm. And to help and coming into humility of like
Yeah,
help me go through this because it's too heavy,
sure.
and so having to surrender that. And that's tough because not, I mean, this is obviously very much counseling from a Catholic perspective. And like we have secular clients who are like, that's not for me, and so how do we help them? And
But some of the
it's
themes of like virtue, and especially I think
exactly,
forgiveness is probably a big piece. And
yes,
forgiveness is something that is a universal.
universal.
Certainly a lot easier with
Hmm.
Christ.
Yeah, definitely.
Without Christ, I don't know how you'd
Yeah,
forgive, but
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, even just philosophically, which I love. I'm learning more and more about St. Thomas Aquinas through my husband, but philosophically, you enslave yourself by
mm,
not forgiving.
yes,
So that
exactly.
person is still winning over you because you are now in
Right.
in your own little hell. Reading Dante is great for that too. What circle of hell are you letting yourself stay in because of
Yeah,
the hurt that you are allowing to live over and over again? And at some point we have to make a decision. And that's the other part of healing is when as soon as just as we decide to follow Jesus, we also have to decide to move on,
hmm,
to move forward. And what does that look like? Well, that's part of the conversation you need to be having with our Lord.
yeah. And I think John Eldridge goes on to talk about another instance of healing that I think is very important in that piece. So of course God can heal us directly through prayer and through just the grace He pours into our soul.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the wounds that we carry are because we've believed lies
Mm.
about ourselves, about others, about God, about the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what we have to do is first of all recognize the lies we've believed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard though to overcome a lie just by itself because we need to have experience of the opposite. And a lot of times I've found in my own life, God will give me the experience of the opposite. So for example, if the lie I believe is I'm not good enough, then he's calling me perhaps to master some skill or to step out in faith and do something difficult where I can say, wow, with God's grace and strength, I've
I
conquered
am.
that
Yeah.
and I am good enough. And now I've
Mhm.
kind of proven that, and I've weakened the strength of the lie in my life
Beautiful.
and stood upon the truth.
Perfect.
You
Yeah.
know?
It's and all of these things, like you're saying, the wounds, well, the wounds left you with a belief. And it may be a belief about yourself, it may be a belief about the world, it may be all of it, and it's like, wow, okay, is that actually true? And therein lies the lie.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, where do we now that I've recognized it as a lie, what is true?
Right. And I think we have to sometimes be proactive in that healing to pursue things that are going to teach us the truth and not the lie.
Yeah.
So for example, if I am a kind of person who says I can't do this, then maybe we really have to sign up for a class or put ourselves out there, and a lot of times we kind of retreat into our safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes our safe space is not the healthy space,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
because you have to go out and live your life in the world. And
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
I don't know if you see this, but I've certainly see that it seems like we have kind of a mental health crisis
Oh,
in our world today.
yes.
What's the genesis of that? Why are so many people struggling mentally with depression, anxiety, unforgiveness, like whatever, so many wounds?
Well, I would say the destruction of the family, for one thing.
Hmm.
I mean, we asked Jordan Peterson the other day at Radio City, and he said it was the abortion pill. Everyone, imagine Radio City being completely packed, and
Wow.
he said the pill.
That's bold.
Yeah, it was so
That's
good.
bold. I love
was
it.
like,
I love
oh my
it.
goodness. So that's one, destruction of the family, the abortion, and then definitely that's from way back, and now we're living the impacts of that double, like tenfold. And I think especially now, social media, we're all connected, but not actually connected, and everyone just posting about their best lives, but not sharing their not great parts of life.
Yeah,
And
no real
we've lost
vulnerability.
real vulnerability. We've become we've lost genuinity, authenticity, and the pace of life. So many things. I would say it's a conglomeration of a lot of things, but definitely these main things. Pace
Yeah.
of life is just crazy.
I am
these
amazed.
days.
It is true. I live in actually a very nice neighborhood where my parish is in Monroe. And
Mm,
we probably have a good dozen neighbors within walking distance. And I
mm.
think there's only one family that I've ever seen outside
Oh
who I've ever
wow.
met.
Oh wow.
So everyone, they drive, they go into their garage, and I never see them. And it's a really kind of a shame. Like, I don't know their names. And here they are
Mm.
a block away, less than a block away,
Yeah.
and so
So
that does break your heart.
it does. Someone posted recently, I haven't seen anyone take out their groceries in a while. That's like, that's so true. Like, wow, it's either like the groceries arrive and they bring them in, or they get in the house, and it's like there's no more interacting, of
Yeah.
neighbors or even knowing your neighbors. Although one weird thing, we recently had someone try and break into our apartment.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah, it
Oh, I'm
is a
sorry.
no-no.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
kind of scary. Yeah.
but we ended up getting a Ring camera.
Okay.
And I never knew this, but through that Ring app, they have like this community watch. And so they message each other, like they kind of blast out to the group, whoever's on it, strange guy in an orange sweater broke into my car the other day. Watch out, or
Huh.
2 bobcats in the yard. And I'm like, wow, this is like the version now of like, now we don't even like just go, hey, just want to, go to the next house and hey, just so you know, there's a bobcat.
Interesting.
So-and-so.
Interesting.
It's like
So
we're just blasting it on an app, and they don't put names. It's like neighbor 15, neighbor 10, neighbor
Neighbor
17. I'm like, oh,
lest you know who they
lest
are.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, no.
Yeah.
That's really a shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Bizarre.
I mean, how much of an impact, I'm sure it's probably a big impact, but how much of an impact is loss of God in terms of the mental health?
Oh my gosh.
and
Yes.
and why is God kind of the solution to some of our mental health crises?
Kind of the solution.
The solution.
I was
The
gonna, like,
solution.
let me just
All of the
let me get
solution,
right
right?
back to no. I mean, yeah, for sure. He is right, and but at the same time, we have to. I always think of the image of Michelangelo's painting. What is this with the finger?
Oh yeah,
Or
in the Sistine
the
Chapel
Sistine
ceiling,
Chapel,
the creation
yes.
of Adam.
There we go. I always forget it. My husband is probably laughing at me now. He's like, I always tell it to you. But I think of that, like here he is reaching to us, and all we have to do is, ding, But it's that, yeah, he is the answer, but we have a part to play. in that. And so it's like one person, someone has to go through a journey,
Yeah.
to come to that place of go, I do need you. You are the way. And then that's one piece. But then the journey to that is so convoluted. There's, especially if you have a lot of mental health issues, because I would say that there are definitely mental health issues that are um, more more than just thinking about healing or having to go through a journey of healing.
Like
There's
biologically
real
based.
illnesses, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, biochemical.
chemical imbalances and such that one has to surrender. I mean, there's wonderful um, bipolar Catholics out there writing books now about that to help us
Mm.
understand more their experience. And Lisa Rumpel has a great book. It's on Amazon. I can't remember the title now, but she shares her experience of living with bipolar.
I'm glad for that because I have heard some Catholics say, well, if you have mental illness, it's a sign you're not praying enough, which is not
Oh,
true.
no,
There's
yeah. So that's,
certainly
I just
mental illness is
really
very
want to make
real.
sure we say
Yeah,
that. That's
absolutely.
really important.
And there's a definitely
Yeah.
biological component for much of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it
Yeah.
is amazing how the emotions and the soul and the soul, spirit, and the mind are very intertwined.
Yeah.
And when you're not at peace in one, you won't be at peace in the other.
The other.
And
Mhm.
yeah, I had an interesting experience this past weekend. I teach confirmation class, and
Oh, nice.
you get all kinds of kids in my confirmation class. But my Sunday morning class has the most stark difference between kids that have faith and don't have faith. And this girl at the beginning of class, she said, can I have my sister as my sponsor? And I said, well, I'm sure if she's a practicing Catholic. And I think the girl said, well, she doesn't practice and she doesn't even really believe.
Oh,
I said, well, maybe that's not the best, example for you. And then the girl said, well, truth be told, I don't really believe either.
okay.
So I'm like,
Okay.
let's talk about this later because that's kind of
Yeah.
a big deal. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to get confirmed you don't
Right.
believe in this
That's
stuff.
like,
But I looked at her, and she's a girl who has struggled a lot with mental illness and with self-harm. And a couple girls over is this girl who is actually she's told me that she feels called to become a nun,
wow.
and she's actually going to go to a boarding school for girls discerning that in high school,
Wow.
which I thought was really beautiful.
Mhm.
And there's just a peace and a joy that radiates on her face. And I just thought this
Yes.
contrast was so stark. Here's this girl who struggled so much with mental illness, in part because I don't think she does believe that. And it's not that believing in God will take away
No.
all your
Yeah.
mental illness, but at least
There's a
it gives
big
you
part.
perhaps
Yeah.
a framework to understand it, the grace needed to overcome it.
Yeah. The meaning of life.
Yeah, the meaning
Right?
of it.
The meaning. What am I doing here? And when you put that in order, then everything else falls in place, even if there are other parts that are really difficult to reconcile because it's more of an emotional level
Yeah,
or a chemical level,
sure.
right?
Viktor
Yeah.
Frankl, I'm sure you've studied him probably quite a bit. He wrote a very famous book called Man's Search for Meaning, which was very impactful for me in college. And talked about he was a German Jewish psychologist who went to Auschwitz and thankfully was released. And he wrote this book talking about his theory of psychology, which he called logotherapy,
Hmm.
which is basically like it's based on let's find a meaning to your suffering. Let's find a meaning to your life.
Yes.
And he says, once you find that meaning and a purpose, then you can have the strength to endure anything. And that's, I think, what God gives us, because
Yeah.
that's the deep desire of our human heart to know that our life's not meaningless.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so beautiful when a soul comes to that place.
Yeah.
And so, we'll pray for that student of yours.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So we only have a couple minutes left, but for those Catholics who are perhaps whether they're struggling with mental illness or whether they're mentally feel like they're in pretty good shape, what are some tips that you would give, some advice you would give to stay mentally healthy or to become mentally healthy?
Yeah.
What can we do?
Well, we talked just now about putting order in your life, right? And so making sure you're attending to conversation with God, learning more about him. And then a great acronym that I like to live by and to share is SEEP, SEE. Sleep, eat, exercise, and prayer.
Huh.
And so making sure you're taking care of your physical body, your mental health, your eating well, exercising, so that's the physical part, and then making sure you're surrounding yourself with good people. People that think of the people that you would like to become one day. The good examples that you have, and making sure you're fostering those friendships, and maybe if they're older than you, asking them questions about their life and how they live. And the prayer piece for sure, that's like the number one part of making sure you're getting to know God and having him direct you, letting him be the counselor, the father, the leader. Um, and yeah, you're everything.
That's a beautiful thought. The integration of the body, mind, and soul is such an interesting factor.
Yeah,
That
seep.
is sleep. I like that a lot. So sleep,
Yeah.
eat,
Eat,
exercise, and prayer, and then your relationships.
Yes.
Being made in the image and likeness of God, who is a Trinity, shows that we are social beings,
Yeah.
and that is pretty much for me, at least personally. I can deal without sleep. I can deal with eating wrong as long as I have prayer and good relationships with others.
Make
and
a big difference.
It makes a
yeah,
huge,
and you
huge
feel
difference.
it in your body. It's when you start to tweak these things. Your eating, your sleeping, your exercise, your prayer life. You really start to build a strong foundation in which you get to launch your life in God's vision for you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have some kids at the school where we teach at Cardinal Kung who were sharing with me today that they're beginning the Exodus 90 program.
Oh, nice. Brave men.
Yeah.
Brave young men.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Absolutely. And for those who don't know, Exodus 90 is a very intense 90 days of fasting, prayer, asceticism, cold showers, no YouTube. Yeah. So it's a great struggle for them. But what impressed me is that, here's these juniors and seniors in high school who want to put that structure and to make healthy choices in every aspect of their life. Because I think in today's world, probably more so than in the past, it's easy to make unhealthy choices, whether we choose bad food.
It's everywhere. It's like,
entertainment, not exercise,
Yeah, totally.
So, but for mental health, it's such an important thing.
And they will feel so free.
Yes.
As they go through it, they're like, wow, I can actually think. I can, I'm not a slave to my devices or vices. And that they have now mastered.
Yes. And that's what it's about, that interior freedom.
Exactly.
Even the psychological healing is for interior freedom. Yeah. Freedom to be who you were meant to be.
Oh, I'm so excited for them.
So, yeah.
I'm sure there's a female version. I should tell the
There
girls.
is actually
What is
Fiat 90.
Fiat 90?
Fiat
okay.
90.
I'm going to get some girls.
Yeah. I don't think you have to do cold showers. So
yeah.
That's not too bad. I think you can handle it.
Okay.
But get some girls and go through that with them. Okay. That's awesome. Good. So finally, a last question. Okay. If a Catholic is going through some sort of mental distress, is it necessary for them to find a Catholic mental health professional? Because that can be very hard to find. There's a lot of very secular ones out there. How necessary do you think it is to find a Catholic one?
I would say know yourself. If you, and this is a tough one because I think even me who I know myself and I would go see somebody who's not necessarily Catholic, just know that you're going to be exposing yourself to somebody who now you've let into your life in an intimate way. And are you okay with them directing and leading and walking alongside you in the most vulnerable parts of your life? And are you okay with some of their suggestions not being sound? That's going to be something you have to be very discerning on what they say, the comments they make, the advice they give, the suggestions they make. So I would say going that route is good for someone who really is well formed and rooted, and to be leery of, if you're not, well, be prepared that you may be a little bit swayed or confused or
Luckily, there are resources out there, right?
Yes.
Right in our very area, there's the Catholic Psych Institute, My Catholic Doctor,
Catholic Psych Institute.
Some different options, and more. You do a lot of telehealth, right?
Yeah.
You do sessions via Zoom, which is kind of interesting. Do you find that that's a barrier to honesty?
It was the pandemic that pushed me into that. I really was like, I'll never be a telehealth. Like, no. And then eventually I was like, oh, okay, actually, this is one. It was the only option at the time. And as I got more comfortable with it, I realized, oh, that's actually doable. Like, it's quite good. So
yeah, good. Okay.
The best obviously is in person if you can. If you are lucky enough to have a Catholic counselor in your neighborhood and you are willing to drive some ways, do it. I say go for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, definitely, I encourage any young person who wants to enter the field of psychology and therapy.
Yes.
The need is huge, and you will have a full docket of patients
Yes,
day one
you-
hanging a shutter. So
Yeah.
I highly recommend that. It is a need,
Yeah.
and especially integrating the faith aspect into our mental health and our culture and our world today.
Yes. It's definitely a vocation.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Not
discern
easy.
that.
Not
Not
easy, I'm
easy.
sure.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us, those who listened. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM and 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time to Restless.